pretty passionate about, working with individuals with trauma and human trafficking victims.
I'm Maria Rawson. I am also a student here at the Chicago School. I'm in my internship 1, so I will be graduating at the end of this year with my master's in clinical mental health counseling. I currently work for a nonprofit organization in Arizona as a foster care and adoption specialist, as well as I do volunteer work as a CASA for children in the foster care system.
And I'm Dr. Eldridge, Dr. E, and I'm a faculty in the counselor education department and also work in private practice in Denver, Colorado. And I also am the co-chair of the Denver Anti-Trafficking Alliance Mental Health Subcommittee, which is such a mouthful, and also part of trying to lead and partner with students in our counselor education department, starting a human trafficking research and interest group. So that is me.
Want to give a shout out to Dr. Dixon and Michael Sutton as well. They're going to be here helping us if anybody needs anything. So yeah. Cool. All righty. These are the key tenets we're going to go over: the warning signs, the impact of federal and state laws, rates of trafficking, impact of culture, socioeconomic status, SSES, best practice for multidisciplinary advocacy, and case examples as well. Also some resources for you guys. What is human trafficking? Human trafficking is obviously the legal exploitation of a person. And there's 3 key elements that people need to consider: is the force, fraud, and coercion. If they are under 18, there does not have to be any of these things for it to be considered trafficking. So, and there's 3 different important types. Sex trafficking, when an individual is compelled by force or fraud or coercion to engage in commercial sex acts. Sex trafficking of minors occurs when the victim is under the age of 18. For cases involving minors, it is not necessary for, again, the proof of force, fraud, or coercion. Labor trafficking is basically modern day slavery, when an individual is compelled by force, threats, or fraud to perform labor or services. And then domestic servitude. So that's like individuals within a household who appear as nannies or housekeepers or any type of like domestic workers, but they are being controlled or exploited in some way.
So in the trafficking world, especially in determining if something can be considered trafficking, and this is important for prosecutors to explore, we're looking for 3 pieces, 3 elements, and we call this the AMP model. There needs to be an action. That action does not necessarily have to be transporting people, which that's kind of a common misnomer that people think you have to be moved from one country to another, crossing a border. That can happen, but that doesn't have to happen in order for something to be considered trafficking. Simply the recruitment of someone into a trafficking situation is enough to be considered an action, but also harboring, so holding somebody, transporting, like we said, providing the service, I'm putting serious air quotes around that, but to Johns, to people who are purchasing, and also those people who are patronizing. All of that can be considered the action piece. As Mason just talked about, the means is a very key piece to this, the force, fraud, and coercion, except in the case of minors. Thinking about force, fraud, and coercion, a lot of times people who are unfamiliar with the realities of trafficking say, why didn't they leave? Why didn't they just get out? I mean, they're an adult. They weren't even a minor. They could have left. They had a family, you know, like all of these confusions. It can be puzzling if you don't understand the intricacies of trafficking. And this is the key component of why it is hard to get out. When somebody is coercing you and saying you need to do this or else I will release these pictures of you, then maybe you didn't realize the pictures were being taken or videos were being taken. Maybe you didn't realize how they would be used against you. That sort of coercion can have a very strong motivating factor. It can also be quite terrifying. You will do this for me or else I will harm, kill, exploit someone you love, someone you care about. Fraud, portraying yourself as someone. When we get to our case example, we'll see the element of fraud kind of big time. Like, I can make you whatever. I can make you a star. I can make you the next big thing. I can take you to another kind of world. All of that is fraudulent. And then, of course, force, which may be physical, sexual abuse, terrorizing, pretty horrific stuff. I won't go into too much more of that. And then there's always a purpose. So why are they doing that? And typically this is to make money, to gain power, to provide some kind of, again, air quotes, service to the people who are purchasing it, and again, gaining money for the traffickers. Money and power, I should say, both are big.
The warning signs for adults, things to look for when you guys are out there in the field working with people. What are their living conditions like? Bad hygiene? Are they getting their needs met where they are living? What are the work conditions like? Is it safe? For people that have been trafficked into labor tend to have poor work conditions, little pay. I was reading a story not long ago in a country in Africa. They had a rubber plant, and this 5-year-old wasn't meeting quota, so they took his hand. Someone talks for the victim. This is an isolation tactic. Gives them it takes away the power of the individual. The victim generally has little to no power over their life. Has someone that talks for them. This includes making decisions for them, providing them with the materialistic things that they need, like clothes, stuff like that, food. Victims tend to have materials that they are unable to afford at times. They are conditioned that their abuser will take care of them and that they don't need anyone else. Again, isolation. It's all about making the victim feel like they are powerless and have no control over their own life. And then lastly, branding. This just shows ownership of the individual. Generally, it could be a cut of some sort. It could be a burn, kind of tattoo. Yeah.
Which really shows the dehumanizing nature of you are a product. A very common tattoo is a QR code, or like what's the lines? What am I thinking of? The barcode. Thank you. That really like explicitly says you are a commodity and you are my commodity. And that having that brand not only communicates to the victim, but it also communicates to buyers. It can communicate to other pimps who owns them, and that they're for sale. So extremely dehumanizing.
Warning signs for children. Same as all the above with adults. Again, with the branding, poor conditions of living, poor conditions of working, low hygiene. With kids, though, the unique is the poor performance in school. This means behavior and academic. Peer-on-peer interactions are generally negative. shows high levels of dependence to those around them in power, like teachers or principals or school staff, or depends on the type of trafficking as well. What that looks like. Victims that are generally I work with kids mainly, but kids that have sexual trauma tend to be more hypersexual. There is those type of things that can be shown as well.
So the year 2000 is the first time we had federal laws put in place to protect individuals from human trafficking, or to even let the victims be heard. Prior to that, there were no laws, which really says something about where we stand now in human trafficking and protecting those victims. So the federal law put in place is the Trafficking Victims Protection Act. It's been revised several times. You can see the years there. The most recent revision was done in 2019, where 4 bills were added. And what these bills did was it increased funding, government funding, to teach law enforcement officers or people in the law enforcement field on recognizing the signs and the symptoms of trafficked individuals. Another really fascinating addition to this bill to this act was ending government partnerships with commercial sex trades. Meaning that no government funds can be used for adult entertainment. And this referred to like military personnel maybe coming over and going to a strip club or things of that nature. Government spending can no longer be used for those things. Another part of the new bills is for demand reduction and developing task forces, not only here in America, but internationally, to enhance training and have a more mandated national strategy for how to work with victims of trafficking. The Department of Justice also came through and has required or mandated that for every human trafficking case, a U.S. attorney must be assigned in the area. So basically what this does for the Department of Justice is they have to hire new people to be present in the various districts for a human trafficking justice coordinator, a human trafficking victim specialist. And some of that is actually handled by the FBI. Additionally, there are federal criminal databases, and they have added 2 new categories to those databases, and they include assisting and promoting persons under 18, and then purchasing and soliciting persons under the age of 18. So the new Protection Act has really ramped up mostly funding and research and making sure that there's enough means for training, basically. In one of the acts, I believe it was either 2003 or 2008, they finally gave victims the right to sue their traffickers, and also put in place laws to where they don't have to testify against their traffickers. With the TVPA, it is a 4-pronged approach. We see 3 prongs here: protection, prosecution, and prevention. And it basically is that increased funds and efforts, understanding the differences between prostitution for children under the age of 18 and being commercially trafficked, and then authorization for to work in foreign countries against human trafficking. Next. So with the state laws, the federal law was placed in 2000. Our first state to adopt laws against human trafficking was in 2003. The last state was in 2013. We see here the filtering for Wyoming, Alaska, or I'm sorry, Wyoming, Arkansas, South Dakota, and Montana. They have the weakest laws in all of our states for protecting against trafficking. And then all 50 states are required and do have commercial sexual exploitation laws, and they all vary. So federal crime versus state crime. For state laws, it's left up to the state. It's left up to public morality or state policing. Public morality is left up to state policing. So while we have these federal laws in place, our state laws have very varying degrees relating to those laws. There are limits. So anything, this goes over the 13th Amendment, abolishing slavery and involuntary servitude, and that's where that force, fraud, and coercion comes in. And basically it allows the federal government to step in on those trafficking cases. There is a double standard for sex trafficking cases because they have the difficulty of figuring out whether it's prostitution or it's sex trafficking. And this really makes a difference for the individuals who are 18 and older, because individuals who began being trafficked at age 14, age 15, age 16 may continue to be trafficked after the age of 18. So they're still considered a trafficked individual, but it gets harder after they turn 18. And then with labor trafficking cases, it gets passed around for immigration concerns. These individuals may not come forward because they're afraid of being deported, and it kind of gets passed off in the court system. Like, who's going to deal with this? Is this going to be something that we prosecute for trafficking, or is this something we're going to prosecute for being here illegally?
Rate of trafficking. So all this data that I'm about to share, it comes from the Freedom Network. If you guys have never heard of that, highly recommend looking it up. Freedom Network USA, phenomenal program. They work with a lot of survivors and they help people get out of that. But I'm also going to share, so the last time we did this presentation, only the 2017 data was out. Now the 2021 data is out. So it's kind of interesting to hear the comparison of the two. Female rates for what the Freedom Network did work with, they actually went down from 80%, 74 to 80%. Males went up from 17 to 22%, and then trans female or trans male still remained the same, about 4%. And then the remaining percentages kind of identified differently. The major of these clients were still the ages between age 18 to age 60, or age 60, 18 to 60. Breaking that down, 10% was 0 to 17. 21% now, it's up from 2017, were 18 to 24 years of age. And then 38%, which is down from 46%, in that time, were 25 to 40, and then 29% were 41 to 60 years of age. Breaking that down between the different types, 42% who have sex traffic victims were adults. It's down from 47%. Children, it was 6%, down from 11%. For sex trafficking. Labor trafficking actually went up significantly, 37%, up from 28% were adults, and then 5% up from 2% were minors. And then for both it went down as well, 6% down from 11% were adults, and then 1% about the same for children for both. Next slide, please.
I think that as you're talking, Mason, one thing I'm wondering, and I don't know if we can really know this, but when we see any change in percentages and prevalence rates, especially through the COVID years, I always wonder, like, is this a lack of reporting? Is it or is it an increase of actually identifying and helping survivors? And, you know, that might sound cynical, but I think we have to wonder that, especially through the pandemic era.
Yeah,
Very true. I know in the school system, the majority of reports for, like, here in the state of Illinois for DCFS happen at school. And when a lot of the kids weren't in school, like, the reportings were like way down. Like, I have some colleagues and some relations or some family members that work for DCFS here in the state of Illinois. And during COVID and when the kids were at school, they actually had a lot of downtime, which is, that totally makes sense. Yeah. So, you know, breaking that down by race, still about 84% of people that were trafficked were people of color. 33, it was up, or the Latinx community made up about 33%, Black community made up about 21%, and then the white community made up about 16%, and then Asian community is 15%. What I thought was interesting was the Asian community was number 2 when we did this presentation last, and now it's 4th. And then the rest consists of Hawaiian, Indian, biracial, or unknown. You know, definitely the data shows that people of color are the target community for trafficking.
So we move into impact of culture. First, talking about religion and religion's influence over political institutions and how it impacts policymaking. In many countries, we have gender inequality, so there may be less laws to protect women in countries where women are not as valued. So if women were to go missing or things of that nature, they're less likely to care or protect them or search for them, things of that nature. And religion's influence on political institutions. I mean, any old movie you watch, you can see the Catholic Church's influence over, you know, various kings and queens and how that kind of propagated their lawmaking and how that influences how we as a society react to setting these laws and protecting victims. And then here it says that democratic countries tend to have a stricter anti-human trafficking law. Next slide, please. This is about anti-immigration sentiment, and it basically is about how people who view immigrants coming into our country or, you know, illegally, their views against that make them less likely to pass laws that protect them. So it says that there's less sympathy among the public, which it makes it more difficult to pass policies or bills that would put protection to protect them if they're trafficked. And that kind of goes back to prosecuting cases, whether it's going to be a trafficking case versus a immigration case. And then there is a very high focus on sex trafficking, which really diverts the attention from labor trafficking. And both of those take away attention from domestic servitude. Impact of culture continued. We go into mainly this one talks about prostitution and how prostitution is viewed. Back in 1910, there was a act or a policy put in place, the Suppression of White Slavery Trafficking Act or Traffic Act. And this is when they were transporting women across state lines, specifically for prostitution and sex and all of that fun stuff. And Basically, the only reason why it was outlawed is because it was deemed immoral. So it wasn't put in place to protect these women. It was done because they didn't like what it looked like. And then we go forward to about the 1960s, we see prostitution becomes an urban crime problem. So this is where they started seeing prostitution, as long as it's not being done out in the open, then we don't care. So as long as you hide it and it's not in our nice neighborhoods, then we really don't care that it's going on. We're just going to turn a blind eye to it. What this has done is it's created a culture where police officers see prostitution happening regardless of this individual's age. That individual is arrested and is put through our criminal system, when in actuality, if they are under the age of 18, they are being trafficked, and they deserve to be protected, but they are ultimately criminalized for the act, and it really impacts their future going forward. Another more new, or it's not necessarily new, but globalism and the internet advances have really contributed to the staggering rate at which trafficking has gone or risen up. And with open trade across countries, especially in countries that may be developing a little bit faster than their policies can handle, we end up seeing increased corruption at those import-export locations. And the ease of access has become much easier. And you'll see that with your new social media apps like WhatsApp and Snapchat. It becomes a lot easier to target children and to, as Dr. E said earlier, with that coercion, take, if you don't do this, I'm going to share those pictures. So Snapchat is like the biggest platform for people to share inappropriate things, because it's supposed to vanish within, right after it's opened. And we do, you get that little notification if somebody screenshots it, but there's nothing you can do at that point. And then that's how, they essentially have that hold on you. And that has been a case many times. And additionally, we have here renewable resource, and that sounds really disgusting, but that is what it is. And it basically comes down to is that when you sell drugs, or when these traffickers sell drugs, drugs can be used one time. When you sell people, they can be used continuously. And so that's really what globalism has done for trafficking. Impact of socioeconomic status, poverty, and its contribution. So this is basically going on about when people are in countries that are facing warfare, and what's going on in Ukraine is a really good example of this, is people are fleeing. And when these people are fleeing, they're leaving behind everything that they have, attempts to escape what's going on, traveling across various borders. They are susceptible to being taken advantage of. They're easy access for traffickers. Homelessness is another really big aspect of this. I believe I have a statistic, 75% of all sex trafficked victims were homeless at one point in time in their life. And people, if they are, homeless, they're seeking food, they're seeking protection, they're seeking that shelter, and they become easily manipulated into a situation where they are forced into selling themselves, whether it be for labor or sex, to maintain a roof over their head. And runaways is another one, and this will kind of go into the foster care and human trafficking side of things. When it comes to runaways, many, especially in the foster care system, they are less likely, it is less likely for a DCS or a DCFS caseworker to have a strong desire to locate these children who have run away. And there's several different reasons for that. One could be that they're not equipped with the resources to actually find these children. Another reason is chronic runaways are more difficult to place in foster homes. And another one is the belief and assumption that these children just don't want to be found. And you've seen it so many times in various movies or TV shows where a child runs away or is suspected of running away, but truly has been kidnapped, and they go to the police and they're like, okay, well, they've run away before, they'll just come back. Don't worry about it. And it really becomes this, to err on the side of caution, like, do we report now or do we wait 24 hours? And when it comes to trafficking, 24 hours is too late. They can be so far gone. As it pertains to the foster care system, I don't want to say enjoy this topic, but I think it's really interesting to note that these are statistics that were presented by the FBI, the DOJ, and I didn't write down the other one, I apologize, but from these studies, it showed that 60% of children who were rescued as victims of the commercially sexually exploitative industry, 60% of them were from out of family care. 85% of girls were from the child welfare system. And in LA County, 59% of children arrested for prostitution came from foster homes. And we're going to go into the psychology of monetization, which is really interesting, is because children who are placed in foster homes understand that the people taking care of them are paid to do so. And very often you will hear, it doesn't matter what I do, it doesn't matter where I am, I'm just a paycheck. When it comes to the foster care system, the majority of the time, children are removed based on abuse, sexual abuse, physical abuse. So they already have a trauma history. And then removing that child from their biological home or their family of origin, that in and of itself is an inherently traumatic experience. So we're taking children with trauma histories, we're imposing more trauma on them in the hopes that they'll be safe in their new home. And then we are telling them that they are only worth a paycheck. And of course, that's not true for all cases, but I mean, that is what it comes down to in their minds, because when they are displaced, they are disoriented, they feel alienated, and then that depression sinks in. When it comes to the monetization part, there's a doctor, Dr. Mallon, who has contributed a lot of work in relating foster care to human trafficking. And he makes the comment that human trafficking and foster care are very similar, because on one hand, people are paid to take care of you. And on the other hand, there is a promise to take care of you and offer you protection in exchange for something. So there is this psychology of being objectified by being put in the foster care system, because you're being paid to be taken care of. And one survivor really summed it up in what she said was, I didn't think anyone would take care of me unless they were paid. So when I met my pimp, when he told me that I needed to make money to support my family, it made sense to me. So in a sense, what this foster system does, the child welfare system does, is it normalizes the experience of being used as an object for financial gain.
Maria, that is so interesting. I'm glad that you're presenting that. And I can see that basically that mental message, I guess, or psychological message that these kids are getting, that you are money, you are a commodity. And then even I want to come back up to this third bullet point here, the children arrested for prostitution. Like that message, when a child is arrested and they're saying your charge is prostitution, a really big movement in this field is to say, like, a child cannot be a prostitute. Yep. That implies a choice, that you are choosing to sell your body, and you are, of the mature enough mind that you can do that. And so kind of fighting and training law enforcement to say, like, that is a completely inappropriate charge, and let's shift the mentality to a child being identified in this situation is a victim, and they need services, and they need a different message than you are just a paycheck, you are just a prostitute, you are again less than human. So anytime you see that connection of child prostitute, jump on that. That should not exist.
Absolutely. And I believe when we go into our next slide, it'll talk about prostitution a little bit more. What I did want to mention is another thing kind of adding to that psychology of monetization is in the foster care system, foster families or foster parents are paid different rates based upon the level of care needed for a child. So if a child comes in with more behavioral issues than, let's say, your average child or what they deem normal, they will be paid more. So I think that also kind of plays into that, well, I'm just here for the money. So yes.
I'd like to add a couple things too, if that's okay. So like Maria, you brought up the point of like Ukraine. Let's bring it a little closer to home. What about our own crisis, our own border crisis right now?
Absolutely.
I was reading I can't remember where I read this, but I was reading that like some members of the cartel were actually kidnap children and come across our border because they're automatically not granted asylum, but they're automatically put into the queue of being granted asylum just for having children. So that's something to keep in mind too. Let's bring it closer to home.
Yeah, absolutely, Mason. Thank you for bringing that up.
Okay. Sorry, just.
And Julia in the chat too said about Mall of America being a hotspot or a hub for trafficking. Where I live, I'm kind of from redneck Illinois. It's a good way to put it. But there's a town where I live on the river on the border between Missouri and Illinois. There's a town called Hannibal, Missouri, and that's supposed to be a big hotspot too, because it's a good stopping place between St. Louis and Chicago, and Kansas City, St. Louis and Chicago, depending on where you're going. I was in a training not super long ago where if a child was kidnapped where I'm located in Illinois, they could be on a plane and on their way out of the country within 4 hours.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, another big hub is Texas.
Okay, this is my slide. So now we're into the like, how do you work in this area? I know for me, even hearing everything that Mason and Maria have been presenting, I feel the heaviness, and this is familiar to me. I work in this, so it's a very heavy topic, and so it's really important that we don't do this work alone. Whether or not you work in a group practice or individual practice, you need to be reaching out to other therapists, other mental health providers, but also others in other disciplines. And when I say check your ego, there can be this, I know I talked this morning about imposter syndrome and how common that is for us to say like, well, if they find out that I don't know how this system works, or if they find out that I have a question about this, they're going to think that I don't know anything. So I'm not even going to ask. And I really want to challenge you to check that and ask the questions. An example of this from my work is meeting up with a lawyer who works in trafficking and feeling stupid, honestly, like I'm going to ask this lawyer some questions that I feel like I should know, but I just don't know. And it was a beginning of a very productive and rewarding relationship, because she was also able to say, great, can I ask you questions about the mental health side? Because I don't know. And so we're both able to say like, all right, you're in your realm and I'm in my realm, let's do it together. Because if we're not going to have this coordination of expertise and services, there's no way we're going to make a dent in the problem of human trafficking. The traffickers are very well connected. They are very sophisticated. They have a system and they know how to work it. If we don't do the same thing, we're not going to make any difference. That sounds very depressing. We will make difference, but we'll make a better difference if we can do it together. Practicing within the scope of our competence, that's part of being an ethical counselor. So again, if you are, not even if you're newer, just make sure that you're doing ongoing trainings, ongoing supervision around, topics of complex trauma, topics of trafficking. Go to conferences, get a trauma-focused supervisor who knows this work. One of the best conferences I always attend every year if I can is the International Human Trafficking and Social Justice Conference that is run out of the University of Toledo, and it happens in September every year. I think this coming year is a virtual conference, and some of us will be presenting there, but even if you're not presenting, I highly encourage you to go, and it's very multidisciplinary, including bringing survivor leaders as presenters to speak about their expertise as well. Maria talked earlier about the 4 Ps. So when we're doing this work, we need to consider the 4 Ps, prevention, protection, prosecution. And then for us, this 4th one is partnership. So again, reaching out and making these connections with all kinds of different disciplines. For me, I've found that here in Denver, that Denver Anti-Trafficking Alliance is amazing. You get to meet people you would never meet if you're just in your office doing your mental health work every day. So you have to make an effort to step out and to get out of your comfort zone and to meet new people, which can be intimidating, but it is really necessary in this line of work. So then we wanted to just kind of bring this to light in a real example, and this is based on with identifying information protected in a couple of different ways. Based on people that I've worked with. So this person that I've worked with did come from a different country. That's not always the case. And in fact, in my experience, it's rarely the case. Most people that I've worked with are from the US. But this person came to the US basically actually against their will, so to speak, not because they were trafficked here, though they were. Their trafficking started in their country of origin. There was, in their family of origin, there was some involvement in crime in relation to poverty. So in the country that they were from, in order to survive, that was just a natural part of daily living, that you do what you have to do to survive, which is the case in a lot of countries. They also identified as gay, and in their home country, this was not an accepted way to identify, and they were shamed and they were kind of ousted by their family and very much denigrated. With all of that in their personal background, they were then invited to be a, we'll say, model to protect some specific information. And think about what that would mean for coming out of poverty, coming out of being shamed for who you are, to say like, wow, I could be a model, I could travel the world, I could bring this money home to my family, I could be celebrated for who I am. That's completely enticing. That would entice any of us. And that sustained the family. After a while, when this person got to a point of recognizing, oh, this is more to this story, this is trafficking, this is exploitation, I don't want to do this anymore, they tried to leave on their own, which resulted in that force element. So they were threatened, a lot of their material possessions were destroyed, and their family was threatened. Coming to the US came through, when I say against their will, it came through a legal battle where they were basically given a choice, which felt to this person like not much of a choice at all, that you can either come and be part of testifying against this person, or we will prosecute you. So that really did not feel like a free choice, a true choice for this person. And once they were here, it continued to be quite miserable for them. So as an ethnic minority in the US, they were certainly treated with all of the discrimination and racism that we have so much of here. They had a sense of isolation because they were away from their family. Culturally, it was very different than their country of origin. Without citizenship, where are they going to get a job? And so again, you see how there's even a risk of re-entering the life of trafficking. If there's nobody here, I have no way of making money. Back when I was doing what I was doing, yeah, there were some downsides to it, but I had money. I was able to pay for things. I was able to feel, a certain status of living, and I miss that. And then also in the legal battle, when clients go through this legal process, it does not feel completely empowering, if at all. It can feel further stigmatizing, further exploitative, because now the lawyers are using you to get their win, especially if it's a big case. You're, the testifying and the depositions are quite invasive, and they're not done by mental health professionals. So there's another opportunity for collaboration, is informing the lawyers and informing the legal team and helping your client know how to advocate for themselves on the legal side. And that's why that collaboration with legal professionals is just essential. And then understanding the cultural factors for this client was a big part of our work. As a white woman, a white straight woman, this person coming from a very different culture, different ethnicity, different romantic and affectional orientation, different SES, there were all kinds of barriers for us to traverse. And I think we did it well, but there was a point where the client stopped coming for a while, which is pretty common with survivor clients. When they came back, we talked about what happened, where'd you go? It's great to see you again. And where we got in our conversation was, I thought you would judge me. How could you possibly understand some of the stuff that I'm going through? And we had to come down to, you're right, I could not understand that. I am here to hear it and to be with you and to not judge you and be a safe place. But you're right, there's no way that I can understand any of this stuff. And I'm here for you. So that is kind of it's one case, but it's very generalizable to a lot of people that we will work with in this trafficking realm. It's very rewarding work. It's also, like we said before, it's heavy work. We have to balance our self-care. We have to balance our learning, our supervision, our collaboration. All of that are necessary pieces in this process. And we are now I think we've got a few minutes for some questions if anybody has it, or comments. I know a lot of us are interested in work in this area.
Dr. E, if you want to put it on the next slide, we have our resources too, if they want to look at them while asking questions.
Yes.
I don't have a question. I just wanted to comment on the whole border crisis going on. I actually have one of my best friends is stationed down there, or she's deployed down there. And she said that there's a lot we actually don't know that's going on, but the cartel is not only trying to get children, they're trying to also get women soldiers. And they've offered thousands and thousands for soldiers. They actually had, months ago, they had a girl go missing. So they advised everyone to, they advised all women to not be out late, to stay on the base, and to carry a weapon if they have their own personal one.
Wow, that's intense to hear. Thank you for adding that.
Yeah.
I'm interested to look into that.
Yeah. So I was in the Marine Corps, and I did 2 tours overseas, and that's not an uncommon tactic, unfortunately, throwing women and children into the scheme of it all. But yeah, that's really sad.
Yeah. One thing that is inspiring in this work is you see, I think, in the depths of trauma like this, human trafficking and other forms of especially interpersonal trauma, you see the depths of how horrible people can be to each other, you also see the depths, or maybe the heights is a better way of saying it, of people's resilience and the ability to heal and the ability to overcome and find healthy connection and healthy love. It is such rewarding work. You know, maybe it isn't for everybody, and you have to ask yourself, like, can I do this work? And it's okay if you can't. Knowing people who to refer to is essential. But I'll tell you, like, it is the most inspiring work at the same time as heavy. So
We have a question in the chat. How can you support an individual within the prison system who may have been trafficked?
mhm. Yeah, that's a great question, because certainly there are a lot of people in the prison system who have been trafficked. And and I haven't personally worked in the prison system, so this is just a thought. If anyone, including from the audience, wants to chime in and offer their points, please feel free. But I think for me, a lot of it starts with psychoeducation and validation of, like, not just psychoeducation around trafficking itself, though that is a huge part of it, but also psychoeducation around our response to trauma, including attachment theory, including nervous system theory, including self-loathing, shame, emotion, just basic emotions, like putting those pieces together to try to lessen the shame that goes, especially if you're in the prison system and you've been part of trafficking. Imagine the shame and treatment that you're given, or the way that you're treated by others, and the way you might be treating yourself. So trying to normalize some of that, of like, of course, it's understandable that it's hard to get out of this life when, you know, there are threats against your family, or this is the only way you knew how to operate, or this is how you got a roof over your head. Like, yeah, we can understand that. And so trying to normalize some of that through psychoeducation and kindness, not showing that judgment. That'd be where I would start.
Another question we have is, any good book recommendations for having a healthy sexual relationship after trauma? Right off the top of my head, obviously, for healing from trauma, I can think of The Body Keeps a Score, but also there is one called In an Unspoken Voice, How the Body Releases Trauma and Restores Goodness by Peter Levine. Those are very good books on understanding how to heal after trauma in general. Do you guys have any recommendations for healthy sexual relationships?
Mm-hmm.
There is one resource called sexualrespect.columbia.edu, which offers several resources. So I will put that in the chat.
Thanks, Maria. And Michael is adding one, Reclaiming Pleasure, a sex positive guide. Excellent. Thank you, Michael. Yeah, the books that I'm looking at are very they're wonderful, including some that Maria said, but they're not necessarily specific to reclaiming your sexual identity. Okay, well, we are at the end of our time. Thank you all so much for being here, being participants, asking questions, offering comments, and being interested in this topic. Truly, we need all of us to be interested in this topic. And again, it doesn't mean you have to work with it if it's not feasible for you, but to be aware, that's essential. Thank you all. Okay, I'm going to stop recording and